Imagine launching a product without spending hours writing and scheduling emails manually. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to fully automate your product launch emails using Airtable and Make as well as Mailchimp. So you can focus on growing your business while your emails run on autopilot. And most businesses don't even do proper product launches. With this tool, you belong to the few that actually do. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to create an automation that creates, schedules, and sends your launch emails without lifting a finger. You'll also see how this setup can work with any email platform, not just Mailchimp. And here's how it works. So we have our brand data, and this comes from a separate video. Don't worry about it. We're going to go in more depth in this video where we can set up details about our brand, some content guidelines, and we can use an email template that we can generate with a click of a button. But here comes the interesting part for this video, where we can generate a promotional email just with a click. So we can select what kind of email it is, and the emails should be created in this order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 default emails that will generate a lot of conversions for you because they are structured in a sales psychological approach, so to speak. So they help you sell more of your product that you want to launch. Then you select your product and service that you want to sell. So you can add the service from here, selecting one of the services that you have. In my case, for example, my AI workflow automation. And then I can just click on create promotional email. I get a check here whether I have selected a service, otherwise I'm not gonna get this to work. And then it starts creating the email for me. And then I will find it under my promotional email. So a new promotional email will be generated here for me, which has an image, an email subject, as well as the email content. And here are the 5 emails for the right flow of a sales launch. All right. So here's the email that was just created for us. It didn't take very long, as you can see here. So it created this email for me, and then I can just generate the preview, add the image or leave it out of the image. So let me do that real quick. And once the email is here, so you can see this is the preview of the email with the details, with the entire text. And then we have our create campaign button. So once we click that, that will generate the campaign for us directly in Mailchimp. So you will find that a new campaign will be added here any moment now. All right, let's refresh. There we are. Last chance to revolutionize your workflow with AI automation. That's the email that we just generated. And then I can set the schedule time when I want to schedule the email, and I can schedule the email or I can directly send it now. And that's the automation that we're going to build. All right, so let's build out our automations. These ones right here, this is what we want to build. So we start with this one. So let's check it out. It's this automation, which basically just generates the content for us. What is meant by that? Well, if we go in here and you see that we have this generate promotional email button where we can select the sequence level. So what kind of email do we want to create? The problem identification, the solution introduction, the educational content, the objection handling, or the scarcity, which are 5 emails that you should send out in sequence if you want to create a product launch and you want to sell a product effectively. This is for people who are not pros at email marketing. So if you are a pro at email marketing, you can potentially write better, or very likely write better emails than that. But for everyone else, this is a lot better than what the average Joe can do. And that's why it's so amazing. So this is not just an automation tutorial. This is actually a business tool or business tutorial. So what you have here are 5 different types of emails. So the first email that you send out if you are trying to sell a product is the problem identification email. Then a solution introduction email, then an educational content email, then an objection handling, and finally you say, hey, this offer is only available for another few hours or one more day, and then it's not going to be available for that price anymore. So that's how you do a promotional email. So what I'm going to show you next is how to do this, well, set up this user interface so that we can run this automation. And therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new scenario. All right. So let's go over here, create a new scenario. And this will be a little back and forth between Make, Airtable, Airtable automations, Airtable interfaces, and Airtable databases. Okay. So if this is going over your head, you should definitely take my Airtable automation masterclass or the entire AI automation masterclass where you're going to learn Airtable and Make from scratch. So if you don't know any about these things or anything about these things, you should definitely check out this masterclass right here. It will be perfect. It will be chef's kiss for you. You will be ready to build out all of these automations. There are so many here, which are business automations that will help you grow your business, start your business if you don't have one, or sell these templates to businesses and make money that way. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we will need to modify this field. So let's say you have a you have an interface, and we're going to go deep into interfaces in a separate Airtable interface course that I'm working on right now. So in the next few weeks, it will be released, and then you can check it out. Many of the videos will land on YouTube, but many of the other videos will only be available in my AI Automation Specialist School. However, what we need to do is we need to duplicate or replicate this part right here, because once we click on this button, so let's say we create a FOMO email. Once we click on this button, first of all, we get this confirmation, and we're just going to say yes, continue. And then we will find that this generates a new promotional email for us. So here you see a few promotional emails. So this one is our first level. So you saw the 5 different types of emails that we can send. This is the first email that is going the direction of struggling to keep up. AI automation could be the answer. So here we are making them problem aware. Then the second email, that's where we are, let me check what the different levels were. So this is the problem identification. The next one is the solution introduction. So first you make them aware that there is a problem. Then you make them aware that there is a solution, which is your product. Then you create educational content. That would be email number 3. So this is just letting them know what AI automation is, then a little bit tip of the day, and then there is a lot more that you can do, and so forth. Then comes email number 4. This is addressing concerns. So addressing your questions about AI workflow automation, because we in email 3 introduced, or in 2, we introduced AI workflow automation, or our product, our service, our solution, so to speak. And now there are a bunch of concerns. If you know a lot, something about your audience, you will know the concerns that they will have. They will tell you, hey, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that, and so forth. So that's what this email is about. So it says, will I need technical skills to use AI automation? And then a little description. Not at all. Then here, how will AI automation specifically benefit my work or business? And then some details about that. So this is the 4th email in the mix. And email number 5 is the scarcity urgency email. Okay, so this is the last one. I think this one is it. So here, this is what was created for us. And the email says something like, don't miss out on effortless AI automation limited time offer. So this is where the scarcity comes in. So it's details, and it says why you should act now. It's over soon, so you get X, Y, and Z. Click now in order to get started. Okay, so that's the email that we are generating. And then let's build out this part here next. Okay, therefore, we will need to set up an automation that will be triggered once this button is clicked. So in order to get this entire Airtable, you should go to our school and go to classrooms, and then you will find it here, and you can then click into it and download the blueprints as well as the Airtable URL. So if you go to that, then you can click on copy base. There is this button copy base, this one right here. You click onto it, and then it duplicates it into your Airtable account, and then you can go from there. All right. So once you have done that, you go to interfaces. So you click into interfaces, this part right here. Then you go to your brands page. You go on edit pages, and that's where we want to edit our page. Specifically, we want to generate something like this. So I want to show you how that works. So you click down here, you add a new group, and inside of this group, you want to add a field. Number 1 was to select sequence. So let me select sequence. This is a Dropbox, a drop-down menu with multiple options. And then we want to select services, which is not a drop-down menu, but you actually need to select an item from another table. So let me show you what these two things are in a database. So let's go over to our data. So you see, I have a few different tables, and I went over all of them in a separate video, which was the video about the email newsletter automation. It's also available in the Skool and on YouTube. And on top of that, the one where we created LinkedIn content. So we used always the same table here, which contains all of the information. Now, why are we using brand assets here? We're using brand assets because then this way you can have multiple different brands with multiple different mailing lists with multiple different styles of writing. So this is actually a tool that you can sell to your customers, really powerful tool. All right. So brand assets. Here we have a brand assets AI automation specialists. So we can have different services or products which send to different URLs. So one could be sending to a product page number 1, which one could be sending to product page number 2, and so forth, right? And then what we want to do next is we want to actually create email marketing content and be able to send it out. So in order to send it out, you go over to interfaces, and then you click in here, you click in edit pages. And now what I want to have is here, select sequence and select service and product. So these are, first of all, these services are these two, right? So that's this part here. And then where are these select sequence? They are on brand level. All right. So here on brand assets level, we have this select sequence where you can select between the 5 different options. So you can modify that if you wanted to add more to it. So these are just a few examples as to 5 launch emails. So if you wanted to have 7 launch emails, you could modify those in here and add more options in there. Okay. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and finalize this. So here we change this from new group to, let's call this one promo email. And now the next thing that I want to do is I want to add a button on the top right. So in order to do that, you need to click into the group. Once you do that, you see this button which says add to group. Okay, this one right here, really important button. So once you click on that, you can add a button to it. So this button, once it's clicked, it will allow you to do a few things. First of all, it allows you to do a certain action. And if you select, for example, a run automation here, so you click into this part action here, and instead of saying go to external URL, you select run automation. And then you can select the automation out of all of the automations that you have in Airtable that allow to be used inside of this particular interface. Let me show you what that means. So if you go to your automations, under automations, in your case, you might not see any of them, right? So you will need to build it out. The one that I want to build out in this video is going to be to generate promotional email. It's this one right here. So when a button is clicked, and it says here on the right-hand side in the properties, specifically that it has to be inside of brand assets, inside of this interface called inbox brand detail, and the button currently is called generate promotional email. So how can we reproduce that? Well, therefore, let's go ahead and click on create automation down here. And we can call this automation, for example, generate promo email 1. So I'm going to call it. And as a trigger, I'm going to say when a button is clicked. So here, if you want to select a source, you can see you cannot do that from here. You need to do it from the automation itself. So here, I will need to say, I want to call this generate promo email automation. Now, you see there is an error because it says it's not turned on. So we will need to go over here and turn this automation on. However, currently nothing happens. So we cannot just say when a button is clicked because there's no logic. There's nothing happening when we do that. So let's select run a script, and we want to run our default script that we always have. So let me show you the default script that I'm always using. And I went into a lot more detail as to how this works in my sequence of tutorials about how webhooks work and how the script works and so forth. So let me show you real quick. So we need to copy this code here. If you don't want to type it out, you can take a screenshot and throw it into ChatGPT and say, hey, transcribe this image for me, and then it will push out this text for you. And then we need to set 2 variables. One is the record ID with the value Airtable record ID, and one is the name which is webhook URL with the value of our webhook URL. We're going to see what that is in a second. So let's jump back to our automation that we just built together. It's this one right here. So let's edit the code at the bottom right here, and let's throw this script in there. You will get 2 errors. That's because you don't have these 2 variables. So let's add the input variable here on the left-hand side. Let's click into it. Let's call the first one record ID. You can copy it from over here. And as the value, we're going to select Airtable record ID. So if you click into it, you will, well, in here, you will get the option to select Airtable record ID. So once again, it's this one right here. So click into that only once, not twice. And then you need another, which is going to be the webhook URL. And here, that's where you need to add your webhook URL from your make scenario. So once again, what did we do? We created a new scenario here. So create new scenario, and we needed to use webhooks, custom webhook. We need to give this a name, and I'm going to call this one marketing email automation, for example, trigger or webhook or something like that. I'm going to save. I'm going to copy that to clipboard. So click on this button here, copy to clipboard, jump over to your automation and paste it in here. So paste the URL in here. This will be different for you than it is for me. Okay, really important. Don't use mine, use your own. And then you click on finish editing. So now your script will be ready. Now you can click it on. You see it will turn green if it works. And at this point, if you go over here, you will see that your automation is not showing an error anymore. So here, there's no error anymore. It works. So the button, however, says trigger an automation. So I'm going to rename that. I'm going to say generate promo email, for example, and you can change the color of it. So I'm going to say, let's make it green. All right. Now I will add something that is called a confirmation, because technically my automation that we're going to build, so the automation that we're building out in here, which is this one, it will require some details. And the details are, for example, the service that I want to create a promo email for. Therefore, I need to make sure that I make it a required field, or I let the user know that he needs to select a service right here. So I'm going to say title, are you sure? And then as the message, you need to select, I don't know why it is correcting me here all the time, a service or product, else this will fail. Okay. Okay. So once we have that, and then we can change what the button says. Yeah, I confirm, for example, could be what the button says. And once I'm done with that, I can actually already go and say publish, and then click publish again. And in here, you will now find your button, generate promo email. Once you click on it, that's the confirmation that we just set up. Okay. So when I click yes, I confirm, then it will trigger our new webhook that we just created. So for now, it wouldn't work because we didn't save the webhook. So let's save the webhook. Let's run this automation once, and let's go over here and click on yes, I confirm. So this will trigger this webhook, and it will give us the URL of our brand that we started with. So what is the brand again? Well, it's this brand here. So this brand here has a different ID than this brand here. Okay, so if I click on this button here, it will be different. If I click on this button here, it will be different. If I click on this button here, it will be different as well. So each of those brands here has their own ID, and we are passing the ID along because each brand has a service associated to it, okay, or a product. So let's say you have the product of selling cars. Then selling cars would be one of your products here. Now you can click into this and you can modify it. So for example, here, I can click it away and unlink the service and then select another one. So for example, add a service here. I could do it like this. Now I did pretty much copy it here. So let me just make sure that this works properly. So here, this one, we need to make it dynamic. So I'm going to edit this field and I'm going to say that it should do the same thing. Wait a second. So here we said that we can link unlink records. So we will need to turn this on here as well. So link unlink records. And this way, if I now publish these changes, we will be able to unlink records So unlink service and then select a separate service, for example, slide hive here. You see they're both linked together. That's because they are the same thing, as we pretty much did the same thing here. So this one is the same as this one, all right? So the next thing that we need to do is we need to test our automation. So we saw that we get the ID here. So let's check out if this ID actually exists inside of our database. Therefore, let's jump to our brand assets and let's look at the ID. So if you don't know how to find out the record ID, you can create a new field. I'm going to call this one record ID. And I'm going to say that I want to run a formula here. And the formula is record underscore ID, opening, closing brackets, generate field. And what that will do is it will generate the separate record ID. So you see here DNUK, you see here DNUK. So it worked for the particular brand that we clicked into this button. So let's test this again. I'm going to run this again. I'm going to go to Coding Medianic, which is a different one. So Coding Medianic doesn't have a service yet. So let me add a service for Coding Medianic. I think Coding Medianic was ID 5. So I'll need to select that. That's also something I will need to make better in this automation. So content idea table doesn't matter here. Write software, for example, writing software, and the URL is going to be https://example.com, and I'm going to say create. Okay, so now if I go to Coding Medianic, I will find that I can add a promo email service, write software. Okay, and then when I click generate promo email and I confirm that I selected one, we will find that this automation will run, and you see we get a different ID. So it's the 7CXLTBR. So let's check out the table again, and we see it's the same ID here. Okay, so this ID here is the same as the one that we just saw. So we see that it works now. We get the data from the brand, and now that we get the brand, we can extract the service for which we are supposed to build the promo emails. All right, so let's build that out. So the next thing that we will need to do is we will need to load the brand, create a variable, and then we can iterate through the brand's variables. So in this case, the services. So that's what we're going to build out next. So first of all, let's load the brand assets. So get a record. Therefore, I'm gonna create an Airtable entry here, and you need your Airtable to be connected, right? So here I'm gonna say get a record. Here you will need to add your connection, select Airtable OAuth, give it a name, and then click save, and then connect to this particular base that you have here. In my case, it's called newsletter connection. So that's the one that I created earlier. Now I need to select the base. So I'm going to select the email automation base, which is this entire base, right? And then I need to select the brand assets next. So this table. So I'm going to do just that, brand assets, and the record ID that I get from the webhook. So if you tested the webhook earlier, this one here by itself, by running it once, then you should have received this record ID. So you can now pass this record ID onto your Airtable, and this should get the record for you. So let's do it this way. Let me just go over here. Let me copy this. So I'm clicking into it, Control C, I'm copying it, and now I'm running this module by itself with this ID. So I'm throwing in the ID, and you will see that it gives me all the details about this ID. So these are the content guidelines, the language, about the brand, and more importantly, services. This is what we are looking for. So we are looking at services. Now the services are IDs. So we don't store the services as plain text, but we're saving them as a connection or an ID to the actual services table. So that's why we will need to add this thing here. And because services is not one, but multiple services, that's why we need all of this. So first thing, we create a variable, then we iterate through all services, because if you look at my brand here, for example, automation specialist, it has multiple different services, in my case 2, but it could have 5, 10, 15, whatever, right? So what I'm doing now is I am saying, first of all, I'm going to create this variable. So set variable, I'm going to call this one services. Then I will need to use a flow control, and it's the iterator that allows me to go through multiple items. And the one that I'm interested in are the services. Where are those? Generate marketing email services. There we are. So I want to go through the services because you see, well, the last one only had one entry, but my other one has multiple entries. So then I want to use the set a, oh, wait a second. I think I will need to get a variable each time. Let me check. Yeah. So I will need to first get the record, and then I will need to get a variable. So we just got the record, and now we are getting the variable. So here we got, actually we didn't get the record yet. So let me delete this module. Let me get the record first. Get record. Now, what is the record that we want to get? Well, we want to get each individual service. All right. So here inside of our services, we want to get the record ID that I get from my flow control. So let me just check if that's correct. So here we get it from services value. That's exactly what we want. So here it's bundle order. It's the record ID that we get from the flow chart from this iterator. Then we get the variable. So here we get the service variable from here, and we set the service variable in the next step. So we set the service name, services. It's the same name that we used here. And then we can set the variable. So we can do this here. So if you look at it here, we just get services, and here we set the services, and we need to paste the variable values in here. So let me show you how that works in a second. So here, tools, set variable, and the variable name will be services, the same name that we had earlier. We can also type it out, services. It's only important that it has the same name. Now, regarding the value, you can add different types of values into a variable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this one right here, and I'm going to adjust it. So I want to get the services from 6. 6 is get variable. Okay. So I want to get all services from this one here, from this right here, which I can only make run properly once I'm done building out this automation. Let's just build it out with the default. So here, let's select services again. And here, I'm just going to paste it in here. So the services ID we get from our Airtable record here. So it should still be 2. Let me just manually select it. So it's this one. This is the ID of our, brand. And this is the ID of our service. Then we need to get the service name, and we get that from this Airtable. So here we need to select the name, and then we can select the description of that given service. Okay, so we will need to get all the other services as well, but we can't do that at this point. Or can we? Yeah, let's select those services, get variable services. All right, so that will make a little more sense now. So let me explain what's going on, because this is the most difficult part that happens. So what we're doing is we're creating a new variable. Then we're saying, you know what, go through all of the services that you have in your database for that given brand. Then we are collecting individually each service. So this one is an iterator which says go through all step by step. So in the first iteration, it does this one here. And this, then it goes to that point, it gets the services variable. Why do we need the services variable? Because we want to add to the services variable each new service individually, because this will run multiple times. So this whole thing will run multiple times. And once it is done, then we will have all the services stored inside of that variable, because we are setting it right here. And then we can put all of those together using a flow control array aggregator. And I'm just going to say that we want to use this iterator for this one here. So this module here, we just want to set that as the source module, and we don't need to set anything else. So with that, we're just saying, you know what? We want to do all of these things iteratively again and again and again until we got all the services. And once we do have all the services, that's when we are done and we can go to the next step. So let's look at this automation. Here at this point, we can get all of the services. So this point, we can get the variable with the services, but it will be filled with information. And then we can take those services and we can create a ChatGPT generation, text generation. Okay, so let's create another tool here, get variables, and we're going to get the services here, services. All right. So the next thing is to use OpenAI ChatGPT, and I'm going to create a completion. All right. So here, this completion will contain the following text. So let me just copy the text from here. So I'm using the user role, and this is the text that I want to use. So let's copy this text and let's use, well, I'm using the latest A04, but you can use other systems or other models here as well. You can also use an entirely different model here like DeepSeek or something like that. So I'm going to add a message here. I'm going to say the user sends a message, and this is the text content. So we have a brand with the following name and description that contains a list of services as its products as mentioned below. So we have the brand name, which we get from number 2, brand name. And we have the brand description, which we get from number 2 as well. So we should have it somewhere here about the brand. This is the brand description. And then we have the services, which we get from our array here. And then we need to select the sequence. So where do we get the sequence from? We get it from here, also from our Airtable 2, which is this Airtable here. So we get the select sequence. And finally, we are also translating it into select language. So if you want to select it, you can use the language here as well. And now obviously you could improve this prompt. You could say, for example, that not email should start with hi subscribers. So it should be something like hi, for example. And then we can go from there. So now we have our completion. Actually, let's just run this for now. Let's just run this automation. Let's trigger it from our user interface, generate promo email. That's the one that we just created. So I'm going to say confirm. Actually, it won't work now. It will break our automation because I didn't select the service. I actually didn't break our automation. Good for us. It should have. So let me select the service here. I'm going to select AI workflow automation. So let me rerun this automation here so that we actually have the right service associated. So I'm going to confirm. So then it runs through our automation here. And you see here, we get a bunch of 2s, right? So why do we get a bunch of 2s here? That's because this iterator is running twice, or like the items inside of this iterator are running twice. The iterator itself runs once, but all of the fields in here run multiple times. That means it's going through operation 1, which is our service 1, and operation 2, which is our service 2. So service 1 is called AI workflow automation, and the other one is Slide Hive. So that's the ones that we have here as options, right? AI workflow automation and Slide Hive, which are the ones that are stored on our brand level as the services. So here under services, I have 1 and 2. So we can jump into what 1 is. 1 is AI workflow automation. So it's this service with the ID 1 and the service with the ID 2. So our brand has 2 assets. That's why this whole thing runs twice. Okay, so now that we have that, ChatGPT does its thing. It gives us the message here and the content, and it gives us the data as a JSON file. Okay, so this is JSON text. And one thing that I forgot to do, which is really useful. So you can go down here and say that the response format should be a JSON object and parse JSON object to no, and the rest can be set to default. Therefore, you will need to turn on show advanced settings here at the bottom. Only once you do that, then you will find this response format, and I'm going to say JSON object, parse JSON object no, and the rest can stay default. So now that we have that, the next thing that we need to do is we need to parse the JSON. So I'm going to set this tool JSON parser. So parse JSON, and the result should be parsed. Then, and by the way, if you don't know what JSON is and what parsing is, definitely check out my series on how that works with the JSON series. I created extra videos on just that. And that's why we're then generating an image prompt. So here I'm using OpenAI again, and I'm going to create a completion. And here, let me just copy the text from here. All right, so this is the developer message. So you see we have different roles. We have the developer message and the user message. All right, so let me show you how that works. So you select GPT-4o, for example, and then you tell it that you have two different messages. You can have three different types of messages: user, then, well, we can see that here. User role, assistant, and developer. So I'm going to start with developer, and I'm going to throw this context in there. I'm going to say you will receive text data about a topic or post. Analyze this text to identify key elements such as the subject, action, setting, and additional details, and so forth. Nothing too crazy here. And then here I give an example output. So I'm going to save that. And then I'll need to add a user message as well. And the user message will just be subject and body, which I get from this JSON here. So let's see if this is going to work. I believe it might not work because we haven't run the JSON output yet. So I'm going to say user role and text content. Yeah, we can't use the text output of this JSON module yet. So let me show you how you can still make it run. So you take the output from here, choices, message, content. You take this whole output here, everything except for dash 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 JSON and at the bottom dash dash dash. You copy this and you run this module once. You throw in the text here, and this was the JSON string that I threw in it, and this is the output that I get. So I can now in here select the outputs. One thing that I want to add to the prompt in a bit, because this is going to be a game changer or a lifesaver for many of you. Let me show you in a second. So therefore I need to first add the message here, user, and here we said subject and body. Okay. Now what's important is that I'm going to tell the prompt here to not use backslashes or slashes or line breaks. Okay, so don't use / and neither backslash, and also make sure to not use line breaks for the, actually this with the line breaks, this is a this is something we don't need to do at this level, not at this one, but at this one. Why am I saying this? Because if you are adding line breaks and slashes and / and stuff to your image prompts, this can cause significant errors. So this can just break your automation here. So the next thing that I did here is I used Flux. Okay, so I'm not going to go into how Flux works again. I did that in another video. How basically I'm using Flux in order to generate nice looking images, but I'm going to keep it simple now because not everyone has access to a Flux API, and otherwise you will need to set up the Flux API. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to use DALL-E. All right. Currently DALL-E looks like trash, but it's going to get better over time. So here I'm going to just say generate image, and I'm going to use DALL-E 3, and the prompt will come as a result from this one here, from number 13. So if you are wondering, it has this number 13. So that's why I can just say the result from 13, which you can also see here. Okay. Otherwise, if you don't want to get lost, you can give these things names. So you can right click here and rename this. And this one would be image prompt generator, for example. And this one would be title and content, or email title and content generator, for example. So this will generate the image, and then we can use Airtable to actually create a record. Now, in order to be able to create a record, you need to set up a new connection. So here use OAuth and make sure that you actually make sure that you actually have the right connection rights for your given database in Make. Okay, so because writing and reading are two different usages, so to speak, and you need two different authentications for both of them. So I'm going to say, let me check which table we used here. We created one in email marketing content. Okay, so let's select email marketing content here. And now we need to get the subject, which we get from here. And we need to get the body, which we get from here. So from this JSON module. And the image we get from this one here. This is where we generated the image, right? So what we can do is we can say image here and select the file URL, which we get from data. Well, to be specific, we need to select URL, and the file name, we can just call whatever. We can just call it, I'm going to say the ID of the brand dot, let's use ID of the service dot PNG, or not a dot in between, but just those two. This will make sure that we get a like generic image. Actually, let's also add, yeah, you can add the image prompt ID or something like that in there as well, if you want to really make sure that the image has a generic name or like a specific name. So then for now, I'm just going to save it for now, like so, and then I'm going to check if we need to still add some more content in here. And we actually do. We need to add the record ID for the brand asset. So let me go in here and say the brand asset should be the record ID from the start, because that's how it all started. So each of those brands has a record ID, and that's what we are now storing inside of this new record that we are creating, which is in the end this email marketing content, right? So here are the emails that we are creating, and that's what we want to also store. So in here we are storing the image and so forth, all of it. So at that point, let's run this automation here, and let's see if we can make this build an image for us by going over to our brand data and click on generate promo email. So we have selected something here. So now this should go through this entire automation, go through the services, create the title and content generator, or create the title and content, then extract that into JSON, then use that JSON to create a promote generator. There was a P missing. So this is the result. This is the prompt for the image. Then here we generate the image, and here we're storing it in the database. So let's go over to our database and see that we are. So before we always had hi subscriber, and now we have created this hi email with the professional woman sitting in front of the desk and doing something. Her fingers are awfully thin. Looks a little alien to me. That's why I would say, if you don't want to use the feature of ChatGPT to create images, so DALL-E 3, you should use something like Flux, okay? But as I said, I went into this in our video on how to create email newsletter emails automation, okay? So with that, we have our running automation. We now create, let's check it out. In email marketing, promotional emails, we created this email. Limited spots, transform your workflow with AI automation. We have the image, we have the text, and we have our automation here. Now, there are a few things that we could improve. Number one is we could make sure that we have this claim your spot now, that it actually takes the email from our service. So here, each service has a URL. If you look into it, each service has something called a URL, and you could copy this URL and have it in the automation as well. For now, we would have to do it manually, okay? So coming back here in email marketing, there are a few things left to do, right? So at the beginning, I showed you a few more things. First of all, I showed you how you can generate a preview. So there's this button called generate preview. So for the rest of the video, I'm just going to show you the automations, and you can build them or you can download them directly from the Skool. So I'm going to click on generate preview without the image or with the image. You can select that here. What that will do is it will trigger this automation here, creating the sequence email preview. So I went into this in the same video that I was talking about earlier in the email newsletter generator. So we triggered this webhook. Once we click on this button here, it then generates this email preview for us, which happens because, well, first of all, we get the record. So what's the record about? It's the email marketing content record, which is the record of this entry here. So it has the ID of 30, but the actual record is this one here. So here we could create a record ID as well, record ID, and we run some beautiful formula with the record underscore ID. And then we are getting the email templates. So we stored email templates again in the other video that I was talking about earlier. So there are these things called email templates, which are a bunch of HTML code, which you can also find in the brand data level. So here we have this thing called email template, and you can generate an email template by clicking on this button. But again, more on that in the other video. And then the next thing is we are passing the email templates here, all of the record IDs. So there are multiple ones. So we then get this record, and this record has the email templates. We get the email template that we want to use, the first one. And then we run through either of these two automations. So the upper one is creating an image out of HTML, CSS using this tool HCTI API, where we're passing the generated HTML code that comes from this piece right here, from this ChatGPT module. So what this ChatGPT module does is it gets the data from the template. It then uses the template and adds the data from the email itself, the content of the email, and then it goes ahead and it generates the code. So this is HTML code. So this HTML code is then sent to this module called HCTI API. And this module is creating an image for me with the URL and ID. And I'm updating a record in the database with this image. This then technically generates this preview. So we said include image no, that's why it didn't include the image in the email. If you say include email yes, then it will go the upper branch. So there are two branches, one that will generate HTML code with the image and one that generates HTML code without the image. So this one, the bottom one, is generating the HTML code without the image and then updating the record in the database. Okay, so that's that sequence. Then we just have two more sequences that we need to look at, and that's the one here. So create campaign on Mailchimp. So this one is important because it actually creates the email on Mailchimp. So whenever we click on this button here, create campaign, it will take this email. So now you see this time it comes with the face, with the image, so to speak. When we click on this button, what it will do is it will create a new campaign inside of Mailchimp. And there we are. So it just created this new campaign, and then it ran through this flow. Okay, so this webhook is called, once we click on this button, which then gets the record from the database about the email. So this email preview. So we get the email marketing content with that record ID, and we send the email subject the audience list. So the audience is who should be the ones receiving this email. And there are different types of audiences that you can generate in Mailchimp. Then the subject line, which in my case is the same as the subject, email subject. And then the from email address, which is just the brand email that we have stored inside of our brand. Now, obviously, this needs to be authorized in Mailchimp, so you need to check that. Otherwise, this will not work for you. And then finally, as the content, that's the important part, we are using whatever we stored inside of our email code as the HTML. So we generated in the automation earlier, we generated this as HTML code and we stored it. Okay. So we did store it in our database inside of email marketing content. So this is the email code that I was referring to. So here you see this is the HTML code that was generated for us. And this is basically the HTML code that then generates this image for us. But we are pasting that as content to Mailchimp in our automation. So we're giving the email code to Mailchimp. Mailchimp then creates this email for us. So this is what the email looks like on Mailchimp here with all the text. And then we're just updating the record. We're just saying that we created this record with a campaign ID. So Mailchimp, once we do create a campaign, gives us back a campaign ID right here. So from the output, you will find it here. That's the campaign ID that we want to use. And we're storing it inside of our email marketing content. So that's this part here where you can see the campaign ID. Okay. And then we have one final automation that we need to look at. and that is this one, sending email. So then we have the option, once we did create the campaign, we can send the email either now or we can schedule the email. However, this schedule email, where you need to select a time in the future, will only work if you have a premium account and a paid account with Mailchimp. Otherwise, this won't work. Okay, so that's something for you to check out. Now, obviously, if you click on send now, well, this will then trigger this automation here, which, well, this webhook, so to speak, which then gets the record about what it should send. So it gets the email marketing content record ID. And then depending on whether I selected send now or scheduled, it's going to either directly send the email or it will just schedule the email. So this one takes the campaign ID and just runs the email, send a campaign. So that just sends the campaign. So here we are just retrieving the campaign ID, to be precise. So this record ID is retrieving the campaign ID, and you can see that in the history execution here. You will find that this module here is retrieving the campaign ID, Mailchimp list, that's the list ID, and here, there we are, that's the campaign ID here. So this part here, that's the campaign ID. So we're pasting that campaign ID to Mailchimp, and Mailchimp then sends out the email. And this then generates this email for me, okay? All right, so with that, we have looked at all the automations, quite a bit of stuff to do, right? Obviously, it would have saved you a lot of time if you just took the template from our school. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what kind of template you would like us to build in the future, and what kind of knowledge was a bit over your head that we should go deeper into. As I said, we're working on an Airtable interface course because I really feel like I rushed through the interface stuff a little bit in this video, but that's why I give you access to the base so that you can copy the base and build it from there. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.